Hello, everyone. Welcome to Integrated Wellbeing, the place where people who are grieving and the professionals who serve them can come for guidance, inspiration, and new ideas. And I'm very happy to welcome my guest today. His name is Mark Ireland. Mark is an author. He is the co-founder of Helping Parents Heal, and he is also a person that has done so much to raise the integrity of the field of mediumship. So Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Me too, and that's what it is. It is a chat. And really and truly, every single person who comes here has a nugget of wisdom that they teach me. And so that's part of the reason I do this, because I love to learn. So as the co-founder of Helping Parents Heal, how did this organization begin?
Okay, well, we have to go back to, let me think, probably 2009 or thereabouts. I had a book that was released in 2008 called Soul Shift, Finding Where the Dead Go. And it really had to do with my personal journey after the passing of my youngest son, which is unexpected, and how I got to a place of healing. And I have a unique background too that I might as well inject here because it's relevant to the story. But I grew up with a father who was a famous psychic and had mediumship abilities too. So for me, this is just normal everyday stuff. I'm a rational person. I live in this world, I'm grounded and all that, but I lived with a man who knew everything that was going on in our family all the time. As a kid, you couldn't get away with anything. But I also saw his gift extend to people outside of our family, including people in grief who had lost someone, had someone pass, where he was able to bring through messages with great specificity and detail that were compelling to those folks, that they knew that there's a continuity of consciousness after physical death. So I'll just leave it at that. And he did that to a degree way beyond most anyone I've seen today in the modern world. I'm not saying there aren't really talented, gifted people today. It's just he was a rare breed. And I was fortunate to grow up with him as my dad, because it gave me a conviction that there is more than just physical existence and that we go on in another way. Consciousness is not generated by the brain, but rather is regulated by, or it's a sifter of consciousness that helps us survive in this world. That's my personal opinion based on my reading and my experiences and knowledge. So back to 2009, now this is, 5 years after my son passed, my youngest son, Brandon, passed. And we can get into details about that later if you want, but this is about the founding of Helping Parents Heal. So my book had come out, I'm doing a workshop, and I'm covering some material that my dad had written years ago. And during a break, there's a woman that approached me, and she said, she goes, "Hey, I just moved here." And this was in Phoenix, Arizona, or bordering Scottsdale. And she says, "Hey, I just moved to Arizona from Florida. And so I signed up for this because I wanted to meet people from here who are like-minded." And she says, "I'm actually a medium, I've got these abilities." So I'm like, okay, well, and then it was kind of funny because she then gave me a little piece of evidence. She says, I think your uncle's here, and he's saying something about your feet. Your feet look like your father's. And it was funny because just the day before I was in the bathroom looking down at my feet, and I thought, gee, my feet look like my dad's. And so that was pretty ironic. Mm-hmm. And then anyhow, she said, "Well, it's interesting that your son passed on a mountain, because I met another woman recently named Elizabeth Boyson, and her son was in the Himalayas when he passed of altitude sickness." And I said, "Well, you know what? I took a book, I said, give her this book and give her my contact information. Maybe she'll want to talk, and I hope this helps her." So anyhow, I think within 1 day, 2 days tops, I get a call from Elizabeth, and she's like, "Mark, I read your book in 1 day, in one sitting, and I want to meet you and your wife." I'm like, okay. So we then got together within the week, and we sat down and we talked about a variety of things. And she said, I've started a local group here for bereaved parents. It's called Parents United in Loss, and I'd like you to be the speaker at my inaugural meeting. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll do that. And within a short period of time, she has her very first meeting. probably 30, 40 people show up, and it went well. And then she started having regular meetings like once a month. So it was kind of a core group of people that would come to these meetings. So time went on, and she, the local group grew, and she went on with these meetings, and I would come when I could. I didn't go to all of them, but she built a Facebook group too, along with this, again, called Parents United in Loss. Well, fast forward to 2011, and I was changing jobs and thinking about, well, what do I want to do next? And so I talked to a trusted friend who happened to be a medium, Tina Powers in Tucson. And she said, Mark, I think your real purpose in life, your main one, is to help other people who have been through the same thing you have. So maybe you should think about starting an organization for bereaved parents. I thought, okay. So I just mulled it over for a little bit, and I thought, well, why reinvent the wheel? Elizabeth has a group that works. It's just that she doesn't have a newsletter, and she doesn't have a website, and she is only one location. What if you took what she does and developed a protocol for developing other groups that could replicate this, and it could spread? So I call Elizabeth and I'm like, hey, would you have any interest in partnering with me? Because this is the guidance Tina gave me. I think it makes some sense, but would you like to partner and take what you've done and then blow it out? And maybe we could change a name, maybe to something like Helping Parents Heal. And she says, oh, I love that name. She goes, I really didn't like the name Parents United in Loss because I didn't like the word loss. Because she feels like I do, it's not really a loss. It's perceived by us as a loss. It's a transition. And it's not like you can't have a relationship. It's just different than it was before, So anyhow, she agreed to that. And I built, a website using some package deal at the time, and put together a newsletter. And then it grew and grew. And then we got a better website, and we started having other affiliates join in other cities, to the point where here it is now, a little more than a decade later, and we have over 100 affiliates worldwide, not just in the US, but worldwide. We have 25,000 members, and we just held our second ever conference in Phoenix, and we had 900 attendees from around the world. We had some really top-notch speakers. So this thing just exploded in a big way, and I think it's because there's a need. And also, and here I'm rambling, but there are other groups for bereaved parents, but we found there was a kind of a gap there. And in our view, what we found is the other groups didn't allow the open discussion of spiritual experiences, or, evidence, scientific or personal experiences for evidence of the afterlife, or their, consciousness surviving beyond physical death and being primary. And that was the big difference, because it's a hope element, and without hope, people have a hard time moving on, So that's really how we got to where we are. That's kind of a long story, but that's the history.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that. And one of the things that I've learned is then you are shining light parents, right?
That's the term we use. And it's, I'm kind of tempering the gleeful joy that exudes from parts of the organization. I mean, it is a joyful organization, but you're dealing with a tough subject. And
yes,
Elizabeth is always super upbeat and always wants the most optimistic view. And I tempered that a little bit just by saying, look, people don't come into the organization shining light parents, they come in bereaved. And let's just face it, a lot of them come in a down place. So our job is to do what we can to help give them support and tools to become a shining light parent, which is someone who's been through hell and back, kind of, and moved on to a better place, seeing things in a different light, and being able to embrace the possibility of having a joyful life again. And that term, I have to give credit to Suzanne Giesemann, who is one of the big supporters of our organization. She's a medium, but she has a very grounded background, working with the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Navy in a very high-ranking position, and probably never would have envisioned herself going down this kind of spiritual path had it not been for the unexpected passing of her stepdaughter and yet to be born grandchild, who she was carrying at the time, due to a lightning strike. And then this transition happened within her very rapidly, to where it opened up a new spiritual dimension of her life. So I have to give credit where credit is due, and Suzanne Giesemann coined that term.
She did. I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting to me that you are able to really have that place where people can grow from grief into a new dimension of being.
Mhm.
And there are so many of us whose children have passed that we've been blessed with those signs and connections, but not everybody is in that place.
No.
And so for you, that's one of the questions that I wanted to talk with you about today, because I got a call on Wednesday from someone who had been a former client. And this person said, I need you. My husband dropped dead of a heart attack today. Can you come and be with me and the children? And her children are fairly young. And so when I got there, she said, what do I do? And I said, you stay present in the moment. And she said, I want to see him and I want to feel his presence. And what would you have said to someone, Mark, if they had said that to you?
Wow. First off, be patient with yourself. Give yourself a chance to deal with the grief, to breathe, to just be. And let's face it, even though there is a process of healing here, and we want to focus on the things I've talked about, the hope element, there's a physiological element to grief too. And we can't shirk it. We can't go around it. We have to go through it. And sometimes people put that on the back burner and it stays latent within them for years and they don't deal with it. So be patient with yourself, let yourself feel that and go ahead. But you can do other things too. I think being around people helps. For me, during that first few days was so difficult. I'd want to be around people, but maybe for 15 or 20 minutes. Then I'd want to go lay down and be myself for an hour. And then I'd want to be around people. Then I'd want to be alone. Then I'd want to write. Then I'd want to express. Then I'd want to meditate. So do what feels right for you. Give yourself some grace, and do what feels like the right thing for you. And I was trying to connect to my son in some way, or at least to get some sort of sign early on. And the one thing, I think the very first kind of spiritual thing that I did other than pray was to seek a connection or some confirmation of my son's well-being myself. And I can't promise it's going to work for everybody. I'm not a great meditator, but I personally went into my walk-in closet, shut the door, it was pitch black. I sat on the floor and I tried to quiet my mind and just ask for anything to come through that might give me some guidance. And within a short period of time, I saw an image of my son's face on the inside, like the inside of my forehead is a movie screen. That's interesting because my dad described his ability that way too. But I saw Brandon, his face, and he was smiling and happy. I could see that and just scrolled across like this and going across. But right after that, I saw a cross with an oval loop at the top. I'd seen those, but I didn't really know what they meant. So after that, I thought, okay, let me go Google that. So I looked it up and I found out that that's called an ankh, and it's the oldest cross of human history. It's from the Egyptian culture. I may be wrong. I think it's like 5,000 years old or thereabouts. But I found that the lower portion symbolizes physical life, the cross, and the oval loop symbolizes eternal life. So what I got was my son's face smiling and a symbolic message to say he's gone from physical life to eternal life in something I didn't know. So the analytical Mark here had to go look it up. And then not having known what that was, it was very helpful to me, more helpful than if I'd known what it meant.
Yes, because for me, that's that demonstration that it truly was a gift to you.
Yes.
It wasn't something that you made up or something you were familiar with. It was truly a real gift.
Yeah, only familiar from having seen it, but not knowing the meaning behind it.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing is this, I say, you're not broken by this loss. You're broken open like a seed to grow in self-awareness and new connections. And that's what your journey has been from that I'm hearing.
Yeah, I say it was a catalyst for me because it took me out of kind of a complacent life that was focused more on worldly achievement. And while I always had that spiritual element inside me, I hadn't really done anything with it. Maybe I didn't know what to do, but
Mhm.
this really pushed me hard. And I mean, look at the outcome. I mean, I have written books that have been read and helped thousands of people heal. I've received comments from people from around the world saying that my first book and second book too helped them keep from taking their own life, which is pretty rewarding. And then the Helping Parents Heal organization with 900 people together in a conference that the employees of the hotel were afraid it was going to be real down in a horrible situation, and ended up saying this was the best group we've ever had. The energy was so high.
Oh.
How does that happen with all these bereaved people, with the energy being so high and people leaving there happy, and people who were totally despondent coming in, leaving there feeling a new sense of purpose and joy? So those things all happened, not that I ever wanted my son to pass, but that pushed me to do this work. And now it's been able to multiply in terms of how it's helped others along the way.
Mhm. Mhm. So you've had 2 conferences, is what I was hearing?
Correct.
And, so how often will the conferences happen?
Yeah, so the first one happened back in 2018, I believe it was, because it was pre-COVID.
Mhm.
And we had about 400 people at that. And then we were
Yeah.
going to do one in 2020, but because of COVID, we had to postpone it. So we had it in 22, and we had 900 people. So the plan now is we're going to have it every other year. It's just too hard to plan it and everything. We're all volunteer. No one gets paid. We don't hire people to do it. We do it ourselves. So it's a lot of work. And I give most of the credit I have to Elizabeth Boyson and Irene Vuvalidis, who's our VP. Elizabeth's our president. I'm chairman of the board, so I'm more involved in the direction of the organization than the day-to-day operation. Those two run the organization at
Mhm.
the global level. But it'll be every other year. And I would say anyone who's interested should, look, because we sold out quickly. And we're going to the same venue, and that's really their capacity. Not that we wouldn't consider if someday we had one for 2,000 or whatever, or maybe we do them more often, but right now it's going to be 900 people. So if someone wants to go, I recommend to go to the website and just stay in the loop in terms of the timing. But it's going to be August of 2024. It'll be in the Phoenix area. Yes, it's going to be hot, but it's a great resort. It has pools, it's all air conditioned. And the reason we do that is to make it affordable, because we're really going in the off season there.
Mm.
So like, for example, I think we got the rooms for $129 a night,
Oh,
which
that's
is unheard
amazing.
of. It's a Sheraton resort. And I mean, these rooms are like, they're probably $500-600 a night in the wintertime. So
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
the plan for anyone who's interested in going.
Oh, that's good. And so tell us about the Facebook page, because I love going there.
Well, really, the Facebook page, that's Elizabeth's bread and butter. And that's how the whole thing started, even going back to the original organization she had, Parents United in Austin. She used that as a tool to build a community. And that's really what it is. It's an online community because it reaches people around the world. And there's content of all sorts there, but there's daily posts from people. There's from parents who are brand new to this and are struggling and they're looking for support. There's posts from people who have insights to share. We have Zoom meetings all the time with famous speakers and people who could help, ranging from therapists to well-known people like Suzanne Giesemann,
Mhm.
Mark Anthony, on and on and on. And scientists too, who deal in this, like Dr. Evan Alexander, the neurosurgeon who had a near-death experience. I personally was able to interview Pim von Lommel, who's a top NDE researcher, and those are recorded too. So if you miss them, people could go there and find the videos that have already been recorded, so they can see those and find help that way. So there's a lot there, and also the website. I mean, the website's loaded with things. It's huge. You could spend a day just going through all the different pages, the videos, and everything that's there in terms of resources and recommended books and things like that.
Mark, you just used an acronym that's new to this audience. We haven't had it come up yet. It was NDE. Would you talk to our listeners about that, please? And any of your experiences that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I've not had an NDE, but I know what they are. That's a near-death experience. The term was coined in 1975 when Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, came out. And he has he's spoken to us a number of times, so his videos are up there as well. And he's written a number of other books as well, but there's been a number of top researchers. Bruce Grayson is one. I mentioned Eben Alexander. He had his own NDE, and he's a neurosurgeon, and he basically, in his book Proof of Heaven, talked about that experience and how it couldn't have been brain generated because he understands the functioning of the brain and what he was going through physiologically at the time he was in a coma. Anita Moorjani isn't a researcher, but she has a phenomenal book about her experiences. But essentially, it's pretty commonly known now, but for those who aren't familiar with what an NDE is or the components of it, and they vary widely. But interestingly, the people that research it have found, and this has become more prevalent since cardiologists have been able to revive cardiac arrest patients. They're much more able to get details from people who are clinically dead, no brainstem activity, no heartbeat, brain inactivity for an extended period of time, ranging from, probably 30 seconds to 5 minutes or sometimes more. In the case of Pam Reynolds, she actually had all the blood drain from her brain and body, and she was cooled down to about 60 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour while they were doing heart surgery on her. She had an elaborate NDE. And the common elements of these are the person reports leaving their body, hovering above, observing things in the operating room. And the veridical part of this that helps validate it is oftentimes after they come back, they're able to report what happened in that operating room, the instruments used, what was said, and things like that when they were in this state. And in the case of Anita Moorjani, she actually reported on a conversation that took place between her doctor and her husband that was about 40 yards down a hallway from the room where her body lay in coma. So that first step is the out-of-body experience. And then again, some people have some of these and some have all of them, but it's a mixed bag. But what's interesting is they're very commonly reported to be similar in terms of what people's experiences, no matter their background, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, atheist, whatever, a lot of the elements are common. So then they'll report going through a dark tunnel toward a light, coming out the other end, meeting a being of light or an advanced soul. Some would perceive this as Jesus or Buddha or just an advanced soul. People meeting deceased loved ones that have already passed, having a life review. In a moment's notice, seeing all the events of your life, how you affected someone other positively and negatively, and you feeling it from their perspective. And you are the judge. You're not being judged other than by yourself. And then oftentimes a choice to move on and forego going back to the physical or returning to the physical. And then often, obviously anyone who reports on this came back. So, and then being pulled back into the body, which they typically didn't want to do. And because they found the environment there so all encompassed in love and light. Well, it sounds corny, but they feel this elation, this sense of total acceptance and love like they've never felt while in the physical body.
Yeah.
So that's an NDE for you. And there's a lot of literature out there and anyone who wants to read more about it.
Yeah.
It's one of the best forms of evidence for like survival of consciousness after physical death.
I really appreciate the fact that you're on the cusp of consciousness research, because we're in such a unique place as humankind, and the energy is shifting so much on the planet today. And I have great hope for us as a species, even though it seems like sometimes to me, the kind is gone from humankind. So,
well, at least that's what is most focused on in media, unfortunately. I saw actually a video from another gentleman who had, I could give you the link later, but he had an NDE and his was really phenomenal. and the things that he learned and all, and the validations he got afterward that confirmed who he spoke with on the other side was actually his grandfather that he never knew and didn't know the name of, but later got that confirmed. But he was told one of the things that he needed to do was when you go to bed at night and when you wake up at the morning, focus on the positive, do something positive. And he was asked, well, what do you do before going to bed? And he says, well, I watch the news. And he goes, there you go. Don't do that. So
No.
he stopped. And actually, since saying that, I've stopped watching the news, or I might just blast through it real fast. But when you see all these negative stories, and I feel bad for the people that experience those things, it's one thing to be empathetic, but it's another to be dragged down too.
Yes.
Just because there's a focus on that, when there's a lot of good things happening too, but there's, they might have one good feel good story in the whole news episode, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm. They try, my observation is they usually end with that last 30 seconds or 1 minute, but the rest of it has taken us really energetically and physically. It can drain us so much that 1 minute is sometimes not enough of a reset.
Yeah.
Oh, it really is.
So I think you're right. We're still fighting that uphill battle because you have people clinging in academia, mainly clinging to this materialistic, physicalistic paradigm that's really unsubstantiated, but it's like a religious dogma for them, really, to cling to that. And really, the work of Max Planck, 100 years ago, through the work with quantum physics, uncovered basically that consciousness is primary, and we're still arguing about that today through entanglement and through the observer effect, that mind affects matter. So we need to move on from that, and people are pushing, and I think there's going to be a breakthrough. And part of my feeling too, it's not necessarily having somebody in the scientific community tell you what is true or what they think, but it's a grassroots movement. I think people at our level too, who are pushing for this, we're not going to be denied anymore. We're paying their bill anyhow through our taxes for them to be in an academic institution, and they're not our boss. We're their boss.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, and that's why I so appreciate Helping Parents Heal. There are thousands and thousands of people now that in their own way are discovering the new connections. Their own self-awareness is growing as they interact with one another. Go to the website. And so you are providing this massive education, not only a place where people can come to express their grief, to be met by other people who are there on that Facebook page or met at the conference, but they can simply take it in and then for themselves judge what's real.
Yeah, totally. And I've never really wanted to try and push things on people, but rather to give them my truth, my story, and let them decide what they want to decide.
Mm-hmm.
They can look up the evidence, they can read about it, and they can decide, what their truth is. And we all have to come to our own truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, you said that you're the president of the board for.
I'm chairman of the board.
Chairman.
And then Elizabeth's president of the organization. She and Irene run the organization. And then my role is more directional because I'm still working full time. I don't have time for an active role like they do.
Mm-hmm.
I help where I can. One area where I do help the most, and it's really through an independent thing that I put together, was after my first book, Soul Shift, came out, I got barraged by people with questions about, hey, I want to get a reading from a medium. Who should I see? And when that book came out, I knew some really good mediums, maybe a half dozen of them, but they're more celebrity type mediums. They're really well known. They tend to have long wait lists, and some are more expensive. So I thought, I need to give people a resource that is available and that is affordable. And so back in 2014, I decided to start a certification process. And so I reached out to two people I know in the field. One was Dr. Emily Williams Kelly. She's a PhD who works with the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies, and she had done some detailed research on mediums through some tests that she did. And then I also reached out to a friend of mine, Tricia Robertson of the Scottish Society of Psychical Research. And she had also done mediumship research with a Professor Archie Roy, who was a very highly regarded scientist in the UK. He's since passed. But really what I was trying to do is set up protocols for testing for my certification process. And while I wasn't really trying to write articles for science journals, I just wanted a good way of separating the wheat from the chaff. And I ended up with that. So what I do is run people through, anyone who wants to apply as a medium to be certified has to do 5 blinded readings via Zoom with no video. For someone they don't know who they're going to read for. They're given a first name and that's all. And the sitter who's on the other end of the experiment is allowed to just confirm or deny statements as they're made. And further along, they can, if they choose to, ask to connect with a person by a first name only. And then, so this is recorded. And then at the end, it's all transcribed into each individual statement, which is individually graded to being correct, incorrect, or indeterminable. Because some things would be indeterminable, like a future prediction or something like that. And then the sitter can subjectively award bonus points for very significant statements, like your son's name was Kevin. Okay, if that was correct, that probably deserves a bonus. Your son's favorite food was pizza with anchovies and artichokes. Okay, we'll give you that, you know. So through that course of that, I developed standards, and then I've adjusted them and actually made them harder and harder over time. And they have to pass with a certain degree of statistical accuracy. And then if they do pass, then I put them on this website with a photo and a bio and contact information. So I steer people to that website if they want to go to look at, and there's now over 40 of them that I've certified in that 9-year stretch. That they can go to and look at and select somebody to get a reading from. And I can't guarantee it's going to be good, but increases the odds.
That's excellent. What's the website, Mark?
Well, first off, they can, through my website, you can link to Helping Parents Heal,
All right.
my dad's website and see videos, and the Medium website. So mine is markirelandauthor.com.
Good.
It's markirelandauthor.com. And when you get there, you'll see links to, again, Helping Parents Heal has a link there. The Certified Medium website has a link there. My dad's website has a link where you can see videos of my dad back in the day on the Steve Allen show, which is pretty cool. And then I also have a media page there with a lot of my other interviews, a documentary, a mediumship test I was involved with as a sitter for a Discovery Channel that was filmed at the University of Arizona. That's on there. So there's a lot of good stuff on there too.
Good. Excellent. Well, we'll be sure and have the link for that at the bottom of this so people can find that. That's good. Because that was one of the things that was so disturbing for me. Tuesday night, I was in a gathering and there was a former client there who was yearning for that connection and that validation that her mother was doing well. Those were her words. And so she said, I spent a lot of time and a lot of money, and I'm not sure I really believed anything the woman said. And I said, did she give you evidence? And so I began speaking with her about, did she talk about your mother's high heels or anything that the two of you had done? And she said no. So it was one of those vague things, and it really made me sad, Mark.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think there are a lot of people that are not highly skilled at this. I think most of them have good intentions, but they just don't have that level of ability either because, see, I think there's an innate ability that the best people have. It's just a natural thing for them. And if they develop it too, they're going to be the very best. That was my dad, because he just had this innately. Mm-hmm. My grandmother said even at the age of 3, she saw it in him. And then even at the age of 5, even more so, a major event happened. That I mentioned in the book, but I won't get into that here. But some people just have it innately. And then if they develop it further, it can take them to another level. But I think some people really want that. They want to be that for whatever reason, hopefully not for ego, but for just to help others. But it doesn't always pan out because people don't have enough innate ability. and maybe their gift is something else. So
Mhm.
I run into that. Now there is fraud too. Unfortunately, there are frauds out there that will try and take advantage of people. So that's another reason I set this up, to try and make sure people could avoid that. But if they don't know about these resources, they don't know where to go. So they're going to go to the first person they hear about. And that's a recipe for disaster, because as much as a good reading can help heal, a bad one could really cause a setback with a grieving person. So that is a concern of mine, and something I really want to help people avoid.
Mm. And I'm just so thankful that you have taken this path and taken everything to a new level. So thank you very, very much for doing that, as if you didn't have enough on your own.
Oh, and what I meant to get back to was that, so Helping Parents Heal has a provider list. It includes therapists and counselors. They have caring listeners too. So anyone who's in a dire place can just call a caring listener and talk to them.
Oh,
But they also list providers that are mediums. But if a new medium wants to be a provider for HPH, they have to go through my program first and be certified. So
good.
they're two separate things, but they come to me for certifying mediums that want to be HPH providers. So that's another service that I provide for HPH.
Mhm. Well, and I'm so grateful that you've authored the books you have. So will you tell our audience about those books, and maybe a little nugget that or more that you feel would be helpful for this audience?
Sure. Well, the first book that came out in 2008, which was 4 years after my son Brandon passed, is called Soul Shift: Finding Where the Dead Go. And it really evolved from my experiences. I started writing this the very first days after he passed. And initially, I was just trying to direct my energy into something positive and constructive that would help me. And what I was trying to do was write a preface for my dad's book, because I was going to write a biography about my father. I thought, well, I'll do this because I'd long wanted to write a biography about him. And I thought, well, I'll just do this. And I explained this was the catalyst that took me back here. And I took the material to an editor in New York, and she goes, Mark, you can write a book about your dad anytime. That'll always be there. But I think you have your own story to tell, and I think you should focus on that. And that's what I did. And really, so it evolved from there, where, in the beginning, it was the pain of having my son pass, and then the early signs of his ongoing being. First, I mentioned the thing with the ankh, but then I had another instance 3 days after or so that he had passed. I had an uncle with similar abilities to my father. My dad had passed by that time, but my uncle was still there. And so I talked to him like an hour or two after the passing, and he asked if he could do anything for me. And I just said, well, if you get any signs or anything you could share with me, I'd really appreciate it. It was like, I think 3 days later, I was in the mortuary. We connected by cell phone, and he said, hey, Mark, I've got something I want to share with you. He said, I tried to connect last night and I didn't get anything. I couldn't get anything at all. But this morning I was doing my morning meditation, as I open every day with, and he said, your father came to me, and he wanted you to know he was there for Brandon when Brandon crossed over. Brandon was a little confused as to what was going on, but your dad helped him adjust. Brandon wanted you to know you're the best parents he ever could have had, which is what we like to hear.
Mhm.
But what I got then was the evidence to go with it, because we didn't know Brandon's cause of death at the time. And he said, your dad said that Brandon's death was caused by a lack of oxygen in his bloodstream that caused his heart to fail.
Mhm.
2 days after that, I talked to the physician who had conducted the autopsy, and she said, your son had suffered a severe asthma attack that drove his blood oxygen level down, causing cardiac arrest. That's 2 days after my uncle told me. So that was really the first thing in a series of things that came about. The next one was in February. Just a month later, I was watching the news in Phoenix, and they were showing an excerpt on a medium research program being done at the University of Arizona. And the medium shown was Alison Dubois, who later became famous because of the show Medium. But this was the real life Alison Dubois in a lab doing a blind reading for a sitter. And then they showed the process, they showed the things she said, and then they later interviewed the sitter for validation of the statements. And I was really impressed with her work, because it was specific and it was really pertinent to the people, and they were really touched. And I thought to myself, gee, I'd love to get a reading from her one day. And I'd love to be in that lab one day. Little did I know both things would later happen. But it's actually the very next day, I get a call from a man named Jerry Concert, who had been friends with my father. And he says, hey, Mark, I know what you've been through, and I know someone who might be able to help you. Her name's Allison Dubois, and here's a phone number you can call for an appointment. So I could then tell my dad was kind of pulling the strings and helping me out, and things were lining up in a synchronistic way. So
Yes.
that's kind of the beginning of the book and how things took off from there. And I went to actually several top worldwide mediums, got readings, and then analyzed the information, also reported some other really unusual connections that we had that were way beyond chance. So that's the book. It's really a memoir about all my experiences. And people have told me it's extremely validating to them. It's helped them tremendously. It's put together in a logical, rational way. And it reports on everything that happened and kind of my assessment and my what my conclusions were from all of that. And then I have another book that's coming out this fall through Inner Traditions. So I just got them as a new publisher. They're a big East Coast publisher, so I'm really happy about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But it's
You're welcome.
going to be called The Persistence of the Soul. And it's actually, I had another book that's gone out of print. So it's going to be an updated, expanded, reissued version of that book.
Okay.
So, but I do have new material in there. And I actually have a third book that I'm working on now, but that's off a ways. But this fall, in October, The Persistence of the Soul will be coming out.
I saw it on Amazon, and I can hardly wait for that.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. That book is more of a scholarly book. It still has the personal stories, so it's got a little bit of a memoir aspect to it, but the narrative jumps around a little bit because it's also, I best characterize it as personal experiences and then scientific evidence supporting that. And then I have like a chapter on skeptics and the difference between an open-minded skeptic who really wants to get at the truth versus a debunker who's already made up their mind and really doesn't want to hear the truth, but just wants to defend and shoot down any evidence that doesn't align with their worldview. I have a chapter on religion and history and these phenomena, because a lot of people are afraid because of their religious upbringing to go down this path. And they, well, I can't do that,
That's
so
right.
I delve into that because even, and I focus on it from a variety of Eastern traditions and the monotheistic traditions, but most heavily on Christianity, just because we live in a country that's primarily got a Christian orientation. And that's where most of the fear seems to come from and what people were taught versus what if they actually looked at the scripture themselves and understood it, they might feel a little bit differently because there's a lot of support for these phenomena in the New Testament, especially. Mm-hmm. And then I have also, I think the most interesting chapter in the book has to do with an experiment I conducted with my sister, who has since passed, but it goes back to just before she passed, she put a secret message in a sealed envelope and gave it to me. And then I was to, after she passed, go out and see if I would contact a number of mediums to see if they could give me what the envelope had, what was inside the envelope. So I don't want to kill the suspense by giving it away, but that experiment is in there too. And there's other things too, but it's more of a scholarly book. It's a combination though. So if somebody is more in the feely, touchy stuff and they just want to read the personal story, they could focus on those. If they want to just read, if they're analytical, science-minded people, they can focus on those. Or if they're kind of balanced like me, they might want to read it all.
Yes, I'll be one of those. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that because the memoir is very, very important for our journey. And yet now what I'm so grateful for is all the research there is on bereavement, the book, The Grieving Brain, and so many other things. I just got George Bonanno's new book, but I appreciated the research that he did on grieving people. And in many respects, that is helpful and that is supporting. And then the memoir stories. So it's the perfect fit. That's what your book sounds like.
Yeah, and I actually, it's reorganized in a way that I think makes it flow better now too. Mm-hmm. And with the new content added, I'm pretty pleased with the book.
That's wonderful. Well, we'll be sure and have the first book there, a link to that. And then as soon as this new one comes out, I'll go back and add the link, even though
Awesome. Well,
this.
thanks for your support with that.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so wonderful because for people to be able to say to us, your book made such a difference. It kept me going. You saved my life. You've heard that. I've heard that. And it's so gratifying. And it's just like, if it helps, it helps. And wow, when you know it does, it's marvelous.
When it just tells you that you're doing something worthwhile.
Yes, exactly. So as our time together comes to a close today, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
This is just a personal view, and it's something I always try and wrap up with, but just for people to realize that they're here for a purpose, they have a path. That's my view, that you're here for a purpose. It's not chaos. It's not an accident. And no matter how bad you feel, stick it out. You know, you can turn the corner and you'll find that there's a purpose in life, and it's about soul growth and the refinement of the soul. And so we go through experiences. Some of them are tough, but they make us better than we were before. They refine us, and we're here to serve others too. So if you can connect with people that are supportive of you, you can find a way to serve others that will help you too. You find a way to forgive people and let go of self-guilt or feelings of anger towards yourself and others. That will help you. I think that, you know, and then be open to the hope element. Read books, look at videos, things that give you evidence about these other phenomena that are supportive of life after death. That can maybe, those things all together can help you get to a better place. And then you'll be able to fulfill your purpose and go through the rest of your life and live a fulfilling life.
Thank you so much, Mark. You certainly are living your soul's purpose and fulfilling your life and bringing so much information, inspiration, and guidance to so many people.
Thank
you so much. You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.